news of the day.
Mr. Zimmerman, have you made a decision as to whether or not you want to testify in this case?
With values that never die.
There are certainly a lot of controversies or scandals brewing right now when it comes to the Obama administration.
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
Dealing with the federal government is not always high-tech, and it's not always user-friendly.
The stories that matter.
This is a massive escalation in the tension here in Egypt.
The issues that count.
I don't know why the media tries to make this into a sensation. We have never hidden the fact that we supply Syria with weapons.
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
He's got the red, white, blue, flying high on the farm.
Welcome to American Heartland with Dr. Grace, and we are starting this episode on a celebratory note. Welcome to the show. It is great to have you aboard. I hope you had a fabulous Memorial Day weekend. I did, and it's the start of summertime. The weather is finally awesome in the state of Massachusetts, where I reside. And after the brutal winter that we had, it is a relief, a real relief that finally the sun is shining. And I've got my summer concert tickets all lined up as well. So I'm in a good mood and all the happier because of the great news that we've received on a political front. And that is the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals has said that Obama's ruling on illegal immigration is essentially unlawful. In November, the president thought he was going to act as an emperor and allow millions of illegal immigrants to be granted amnesty. Well, you might call it that. In reality, work permits. They were going to be given work permits. They were not going to be deported. And we all cried foul. We said to the president, you can't do that. In fact, I wrote a piece at the time saying that really this is impeachable because the president is acting in an unlawful manner. What happened, you had Texas and 25 other states decided to sue. And so there was an injunction that was ruled on the president's executive amnesty. And recently, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeal said that injunction remains. In a nutshell, the president cannot, this is what it means, the president cannot go forward with his illegal executive amnesty. This is a slap in the face to President Barack Hussein Obama, and it is a very well-deserved slap in the face. He knew full well that this action was illegal. He had said so 20 times. And yet, he thought that we were all just going to bow down and take it. That we were going to allow our Constitution to be trampled upon as though it was nothing other than a piece of trash, a piece of garbage. Well, not so fast. The states in this country said the federal government has limits on what it can and cannot do. It cannot impose this upon us. And the courts ruled that that is accurate because there would be costs incurred. The states would incur costs that could never be recouped, even if subsequently the law was rescinded. So what does this mean? Obama will not be able to issue his executive amnesty. They are claiming that it was within his prosecutorial discretion. They are going to try to appeal further. They're going to try to take it to the Supreme Court. But essentially, the clock is running out on his ability to do so. And by the time that it goes any further, there'll be another president in the White House. So for all intents and purposes, right now, as of this moment, the president has lost on his massive gambit to unilaterally write American laws. This is a huge defeat, and it is an unforced error on his part. He didn't need to do this. And in my view, it's absolutely humiliating, especially since this is his area of expertise. As a constitutional law professor, he knows this. And we see now our system of checks and balances working and working beautifully. The states asserting their rights. And another branch of government, the courts, upholding the rights of the states. So it's a great day in America when we see tyranny halted in its tracks, tyranny stopped, tyranny held at bay. And this is not the first time that the courts have ruled that the president is exceeding his legal authority. And as I said then, and as I continue to say, speak now as a historian, historians will judge this president very harshly for his unwillingness to be a true guardian of the Constitution, to truly uphold the fundamental oath that he took, that he wasn't just going to try to remake America in an image that's in his head, but that he was going to uphold the laws of the land. He was going to uphold the Constitution. He has not done that. And as our system, founded so brilliantly by our founding fathers, prevails now this week, we can say there is hope. There is hope. All of us who have been arguing and fighting and insisting that he is wrong, we are vindicated and we are given a huge victory. So what does this tell us? Keep fighting him, keep standing in opposition to him, and let us hope for a brighter day when you have a true American patriot in the White House again, whether it's from the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, but a patriot who will do what he swore to do, which is uphold the laws of this beautiful land. Now, to be honest with you, as I said at the time, I said, you know who's really going to be hurt by all of this? It's going to be those illegal immigrants. I actually said on the air, and you can check the archives of this show, I said if I were an illegal, I would not stick my head out right now and let it be known who I am and where I reside, because this executive amnesty is really flimsy. So in reality, the president harmed the people he supposedly is caring the most about. And what do we say to that? Typical liberalism. It always does the reverse of what it pretends to do. Pretends to be compassionate, but instead inflicts great harm. You have all those illegals whose hopes were raised, whose expectations were raised, and now those hopes will be dashed. And if their whereabouts are known, and at some point the law is enforced against their favor, in favor of what is legal in the United States, this will have harmed them. I say it from looking at it from their point of view. But obviously from the point of view of wanting to uphold American law, it remains a tremendous victory. And we hope that the illegals learn a key lesson. When you break laws in this country, sooner or later, there is going to be a consequence to that. That's what America used to stand for. I hope that this decision puts us back on that track. Laws that are upheld and illegality that results in negative consequences for that illegality. So we have that good news this week, but it is side by side with some really bad news coming in from overseas. Many of you have heard for sure that ISIS continues to make remarkable inroads into Iraq and Syria. They now control about 50% of Syria, including an ancient city, the ancient city of Palmyra, which no doubt they will destroy. They will destroy so many of those ancient artifacts that they have little regard for, as they've done in other cities, these barbarians who have no regard for life or art or culture. And even worse, they have taken over Ramadi. Ramadi in Anbar province has fallen. It fell like a stack of cards. The Iraqi forces simply fled. They didn't have enough ammunition, they said, but the attacks were so skillful. There were over 30 truck bombs that simply blasted through the defenses, and the Iraqi forces ran away once again. To the point that our Defense Secretary, Ash Carter, said openly and bluntly, they do not have the will to win this war. Roll it.
What apparently happened was that the Iraqi forces just showed no will to fight. They were not outnumbered. In fact, they vastly outnumbered the opposing force, and yet they failed to fight. They withdrew from the site, and that says to me, and I think to most of us, that we have an issue with the will of the Iraqis to fight ISIL and defend themselves. Now, we can give them training, we can give them equipment. We obviously can't give them the will to fight, but if we give them training, we give them equipment, and give them support, and give them some time, I hope they will develop the will to fight, because only if they fight can ISIL remain defeated.
Well, you know, I think that he's almost thinking out loud in that clip. He's saying what Vice President Joe Biden had to kind of backtrack, and he called the Iraqi leader and said, look, I'm sorry, we value the Iraqi troops, et cetera, et cetera. But basically, the defense secretary said squarely, they don't have the will. And then in that clip, you'll hear him say, maybe they can develop the will through training, et cetera, et cetera. That defies common sense. You either have the will or you don't have the will. And once you determine that this particular group doesn't have the will, you should face reality and say, well, you know what? If they don't have the will to do it, no amount of training, no amount of equipment, no amount of money, no amount of summits, no amount of discussion is going to change that. ISIS has the will, and the Iraqi forces do not. And if there's one thing we should have learned when Iraq, so many cities fell so quickly, so many towns fell so quickly to ISIS a year ago, we should have learned the obvious, as I said back then. I said back then what nobody was saying. I said the Iraqis are not going to be able to do this. There is no moderate rebel force that's going to be able to do it in Syria. When the president unveiled his plan, he said it was going to be airstrikes, the Iraqis, and these fictional moderates in Syria that were going to retake the cities and the towns that had been so beleaguered by ISIS. It's a fantasy. There is only one fighting force in the world that can defeat ISIS and can defeat ISIS quickly, effectively, and smoothly. And that is the United States of America. The sooner we grasp this and the sooner we rally around our president, the less harm will be inflicted in that part of the world, as well as upon us. Because the great myth that is being perpetrated, and I've said it again and again, but I feel it is falling on deaf ears. If we fight there, we're not fighting for them, per se. Yes, it is part of what we fight for, but we're fighting for us, because that is the front line of defending ourselves against this evil, tyrannical, totalitarian force that will not stop. You know what ISIS is? Those are Satan's minions on earth. Satan's minions on earth. In one of the most harrowing scenes of the war recently, as so many refugees fled Ramadi, I saw on television a scene that haunts me, that literally keeps me awake at night. It was of a beautiful girl with black hair and a gorgeous pale complexion and rosy lips and dark eyes, as beautiful as it is possible to be, wearing a stunning red flower dress. This image of great beauty, you know where it was? She was wrapped up in the arms of one of those barbarians, being taken away from one of these ISIS warriors, being taken away, God knows where, and upon God knows what will be done to her. Those are Satan's minions. There is no worthier cause for American troops than to stop them. And the sooner we do, the safer we will all be. This is Dr. Grace, upholding values that will not die.
But there was no answer. And now I know my heart is a ghost town. My heart is a ghost town.
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace. The stories that matter, the issues that count. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
You and me bleed the same light. I want you to know that I'm all yours.
Welcome back to American Heartland. I'm Dr. Grace, the editor of Politics and Culture at WorldTribune.com. As you know, I've come out of the blocks early in the GOP nominating contest, and I favor Governor Huckabee as the one who I think is best qualified to lead us going forward. I think he would make a fabulous president, as I've laid out several times on this show. Well, Huckabee is being attacked. He's being attacked by the left? No. He's being attacked repeatedly by the right. George Will, that columnist, has been attacking him. As we'll discuss in a moment, Fox News Sunday with Chris Wallace. There's attacks coming from them. And even National Review. There's a piece in National Review attacking Huckabee. So Huckabee is not being welcomed with open arms. He's not being treated, I think, fairly right off the bat. And that tells me something. They're doing to him what they're doing to Senator Ted Cruz. With Senator Ted Cruz, the mainstream media, and including Fox News, they're not giving him that much attention. They're basically trying to diminish or blackball his achievements. They're trying to give him minimal airtime. And whatever airtime is given, it's stories that have a negative thrust, painting him as an extremist. Well, Huckabee is being attacked left, right, and center. But what you'll see in this interview that we're about to play some clips from, he really knows how to hold his ground and even turn the tables on the interviewer. On Fox News Sunday with Chris Wallace, Huckabee was asked about his fair tax proposal, and there was a back and forth with Chris Wallace, and he laid out clearly, look, this fair tax, a consumption tax, would mean that nobody would pay income tax, and everybody would pay taxes through what they consume. And in that back and forth, Wallace is citing a specific study, and Huckabee came back very forcefully. He knew what study was being cited, and he essentially said, he came up with his counter evidence that study has been roundly attacked and perceived as a false one. So he gave a very strong back and forth. You remember that on this show, we did an analysis of how Ben Carson upheld his own tax plan, and I thought that in many areas it was weak how he defended himself. Well, Huckabee knew what he was saying. He continued to make his point, and he didn't allow Chris Wallace to frame the debate, to peg him as somebody who didn't really understand the tax policy, or to peg the fair tax as a tax that would ultimately harm the poor, the working class, the middle class. Huckabee really explained that the fair tax, the consumption tax, not only is the most just way to proceed, but it would also be a benefit to the entire country. So I thought he really did an excellent job holding his own against the questions that were being put to him. But where he really shone was on the question of the role of the Supreme Court in our country. So many of you, and myself included, feel frustrated that oftentimes the Supreme Court in this country is legislating. You hear that from conservative talk radio all the time. They are legislating from the bench instead of simply interpreting the Constitution. Well, in this exchange, you see how Huckabee refuses to be pegged as a yahoo, as somebody who doesn't understand the Constitution, or as somebody who has no regard for the law. Listen to this.
Many of our politicians have surrendered to the false god of judicial supremacy, which would allow black-robed and unelected judges the power to make law as well as enforce it.
But, Governor, we have operated under the principle of judicial review since the Marbury versus Madison case in 1803.
Judicial review is exactly what we've operated under. We have not operated under judicial supremacy. Presidents Lincoln, Jefferson, Jackson, presidents have understood that the Supreme Court cannot make a law. They cannot make it. The legislature has to make it. The executive branch has to sign it and enforce it. And the notion that the Supreme Court comes up with a ruling and that automatically subjects the two other branches to following it defies everything there is about the three equal branches of government. Chris, the Supreme Court is not the supreme branch. And for God's sake, it isn't the supreme being.
But sir,
it is the Supreme Court.
Brilliant use of words. What Huckabee says here, the false god of judicial supremacy. That is what liberals are banking on. When they can't get their way through the process of elected officials by persuading the people, then they want to rely on these men in black robes who are going to just simply legislate from the bench. He calls this the false god of judicial supremacy, and aptly says it's the Supreme Court, not the supreme being. And you'll see in the exchange that it is Huckabee who is almost schooling Wallace on our system of checks and balances and on the role of the Supreme Court.
Sir, George Will, the conservative columnist, has pointed out that back in 1957, another governor of Arkansas, Orville Faubus, decided to disregard and refuse to obey the Supreme Court's ruling to desegregate schools. President Eisenhower had to call in the 101st Airborne. Are you saying that President Huckabee might decide he wasn't going to obey the ruling on desegregation, or like President Nixon to turn over the tapes, that, you know, it's up in the air as to whether you're going to obey the Supreme Court?
Well, Chris, as you know, George Will is no fan of mine. He's not very fond of me. He recently called me appalling. So I'm not surprised that he would make such a false comparison. But the point is, in that case, the Supreme Court had ruled, the legislature and the executive branch had agreed with the Supreme Court, and precisely what happened is what should happen. The president ordered the airborne to come in and enforce the law that did exist. But it wasn't that the president defied the law. The president was carrying out the law and using all the forces at his resource to do it.
You know, the question has to be asked, when did Huckabee, as governor, not uphold the law? What are these people talking about? You notice that the words they're using, the examples they're using, this example about desegregation, what are they trying to say about the Christian Huckabee? Trying to, basically, I hear a dog whistle here. Don't you hear the dog whistle? They're trying to imply that there's something dark and sinister lurking in his heart. And then the whole parallel, the reference to Nixon, who resigned in disgrace. Why are they using these words? Why are they using these examples to somebody like Governor Huckabee, who was well-liked as a governor? He doesn't have a record of anything outlandish. There's no example of him defying the laws in Arkansas. And then when he was a host on Fox News, he behaved nothing but honorably, lawfully, respectfully. What are they talking about? And Huckabee rightly makes the distinction. In the cases that are cited the law that had been passed by the legislature was upheld by the court, and therefore the executive had to enforce it. It's very simple and straightforward. Huckabee has never once said that he would behave in any manner that is not constitutional. He's in fact chastising those who are behaving in an unconstitutional manner. And this is something that Chris Wallace knows full well. George Will knows full well. Listen to one more segment.
Well, the president still has to follow whatever the law is. Does Congress have a law that tells him what he's going to do? In that case, the Congress was ready to impeach Nixon, and he ultimately resigned. I want to get back to the main point here. It's a matter of balance of power. If the Supreme Court could just make a ruling and everybody has to bow down and fall on their faces and worship that law that isn't a law because it hasn't been yet passed, then what if the Supreme Court ruled that they were going to make the decision as to who was going to be the next president and save the taxpayers and the voters from all the expense and trouble of voting, and they'll just pick a president? Well, we would say, well, they can't do that. Why can't they do it? They can't do it because it's not in the law. We are sworn to uphold the Constitution and the law, and it has to be consistent and agreed upon with three branches of government. One can't overrule the other two. That's all I'm saying. We learned that in ninth grade civics, but I'm convinced a lot of Ivy League law schools must have forgotten that simple basic civics lesson along the way.
Well done, Huckabee. By the end of that segment, he not only basically gives us all a refresher in the nature of the Constitution and the balance of powers, but he's also saying, you moron, Chris Wallace, even your questions are moronic. This is ninth grade civics. You should know better. George Will certainly knows better. They are trying to diminish his stature before he even gets out of the blocks in this race. They are coming at him fast and furious. You know why? Because they are all enchanted with the shiny new object. The shiny new object, Marco Rubio. The mainstream media, even the left, they like Marco Rubio. You have pieces now in the New York Times saying, you know what? The one candidate that Hillary would fear the most is Marco Rubio. Oh, really? Another piece in the Washington Post, a Rubio blueprint. This is basically a piece about a book that's come out that lays out a strategy that Rubio could follow in order to stitch together a coalition to win. And by the end of this piece, it says that what the Republican Party really needs is a nominee that is a transformational, quote unquote, candidate. A transformational candidate. You know where you heard that before. That's what Obama said he was going to be. You know what? Rubio, the shiny new object. That's what the buzz in D.C. is all about. They love this guy. They think he can get the Hispanics to vote for the Republican Party, and he can stitch together enough white voters and Hispanic voters to take the White House. In fact, in a piece like this, the one that was published in the Washington Post, written by Dan Batts, they believe that some Republican operatives who are quoted in this, that's the only way forward. That the only possible way to win is to nominate somebody like Rubio, somebody young, somebody who has glamour, somebody who can appeal to non-white voters. The quote-unquote transformational candidate. You know what? This is an illusion. This is a false plan. This is a path towards repeating the same mistake that this country made by electing Obama. We don't want and we don't need a transformational leader. What we want and what we need is a good leader, a person of experience, a person of judgment, a person with fortitude, a person who will respect and uphold the laws of this country. We don't need to transform ourselves. We need simply to understand ourselves and uphold the best parts of who we are. That's what we need. But right now in Washington, they're enchanted with that shiny new object, Rubio. And instead, to the one who is tried and true, the solid Christian in the race, the preacher, the one who will defend the Constitution, they're throwing every name in the book at him. Desegregation, Nixon, illegal, dark, sinister. Huckabee, good for you. You took Wallace to task, and by the time you were done with him, he looked like somebody that couldn't pass a 9th grade civics test. This is Dr. Grace, upholding values that will not die.
You make a girl go, ooh, I'm in love, love. Did you see that shooting star tonight?
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace. The stories that matter, the issues that count. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
Dear future husband, here's a few things you need to know if you wanna be my one and only all my life. Dear future husband, if you wanna get that special loving.
Welcome back. Well, speaking of getting a husband, you first have to know how to court. You have to know the rules of courtship before you can find love and ultimately walk down the aisle, as so many men and women dream of doing. Well, this week, I was really surprised. My family and in our household, we subscribe to National Review, and the edition that came in the mail featured, guess who on the cover? Patti Stanger. Patti Stanger, she is the host of Millionaire Matchmaker on Bravo. It's currently in its 8th season. And there's an article in National Review. It's called Tocqueville's Matchmaker by Ileana Johnson. And the argument that she makes in this piece is that Patti Stanger is actually an anti-feminist, that she is upholding some of the traditional mores that used to be commonplace in her show. So if you've seen Millionaire Matchmaker, you know what it's about. She essentially finds 2 millionaires that haven't found love. She interviews them and she tries to figure out why they haven't found love. Many of these folks, they're in their 40s or 50s. And then she plays the matchmaker, where she screens many, many women and chooses a few that she thinks might fit the interests of the prospective of the millionaire that is seeking love. And she sets them up. She introduces the millionaire to a group of women that are pre-chosen, that have been chosen. He narrows it down to 2. He has mini dates with the 2, and then he goes out on a master date with the 1. And if Patti has done her job well, there's a match that results at the end of the show. Now, in full honesty, I used to watch this show. I used to enjoy it. I used to think, very much like this author. This author outlines all the things that are really refreshing about Patti Stanger. I used to think that's really great to hear her saying all these things. What does Patti Stanger generally say? Well, you can summarize it as follows. Women must be feminine, and they must learn to surrender. So they can be very accomplished. They can be as accomplished as they want to be in the workplace. But in private life, in order for romance to flourish, women must be feminine. They must dress the part. They must dress well at all times. I even read her book. They must dress in a very alluring manner. And they have to understand that that's what is appealing to men, Patti Stanger advises. And they also have to learn the art of surrendering, allowing the man to lead. And she also chastises men for being too wimpy, for not taking charge, for not picking up the tab. They should be leaders. And she believes that this yin and yang and some of the old rules of courtship, that this is really what is the key to sexual attraction. That as we destroy these mores, we're also destroying the chemistry that makes men and women passionate about one another. So Patti Stanger, this article argues, is an anti-feminist, you might say, heroine, really, because she is upholding, in some respects, the old-fashioned way of doing things. Now, what Patti Stanger also says all the time on her show is no sex before monogamy. That is, you've got to be in a committed relationship before you get intimate. And she always advises this. She emphasizes it again and again and again. And you have many, many people drawn to the show, including many millennials. And this woman who wrote the article argues that we now live in an age in which there are no rules of courtship, and it's really not working. Women find men too wimpy. Men don't know how to approach women. Women find casual sex ultimately unsatisfying. And one of the lines that's very powerful in this article, she says that essentially the feminist lie has exploded. That ultimately women don't find satisfaction in simply casual sex and a career. Ultimately what they desire is the whole enchilada, including the man that loves them for all eternity. And that nowadays women might have the careers and they can give men casual sex without there being much of a social taboo on it, but ultimately it's just not satisfying. And so the question that so many single people have is, how do I find love? And what am I doing wrong? Am I doing something wrong? So this article makes some really interesting points, especially insofar as it touches upon the tremendous malaise that exists today. And although I have been out of the dating scene for, I think I'm going on 30 years now. I think that's how long I've been with my paramour, the man who became my husband. So I've been out of the actual dating scene for a long time. But because I have sisters and friends that I am constantly giving advice to, I know the current dating scene really, really well through all their stories, through all my late night sessions. And there's no question about it. We have destroyed this society that we currently live in, has utterly destroyed. It has eviscerated the very basis of sexual attraction between men and women. And I'm not talking about the kind of base sexual attraction that results in a one-night stand. That is profuse. But the long-standing kind of sexual attraction, which we used to talk about in literature, you know what that's called? Passion. I don't think we know passion nowadays. I don't think we know the ingredients that make passion. And a lot of this has to do with we have destroyed the elements in either gender that make us truly different and that make us enticing. The more society tries to make us the same, the less interesting, the enticing the opposite sex is. And why? Because it's not so much of an opposite. It becomes more of a sameness. And there's really a parallel here when you think about it. If we're making men and women more and more the same, it's no wonder that there's an explosion in all this talk about same-sex relationships. Those two things, I think, run parallel in our society. As we destroy what makes men and women truly unique and different, what makes them different in their very nature, in their very essence, as we try to make them all the same, we're also seeing an acceleration of this fascination with everything revolving same sex. You know, there's a couple of articles. And by the way, this is not just the promotion of go ahead and come out if you're gay, come out of the closet. Go ahead and come out of the closet if you're a lesbian. There's a lot of talk about this bisexuality. You hear it from some of the major stars like Angelina Jolie, who before she married Brad Pitt said very openly she's bisexual. In fact, there was a recent article in a tabloid about Brad Pitt possibly also being a bisexual. So as we make the sexes the same, we're also seeing this trend in our society, this tremendous interest in same-sex relationships. As I said, I think those two things go hand in hand because we're destroying the essence of what allows for passion to flourish. So then there's a search for it. If I can't find it here in this heterosexual relationship, if I can't find it here in this world of casual and quick sex, then maybe it's somewhere else. Maybe it's in this bisexualism. Maybe it's in this lesbianism. Maybe it's in this homosexuality. Where is it? There's a thirst. There's a quest. There's a search. There's a search for true and eternal love. There always has been. There always has been. That quest burns deeply. I believe it's implanted in us by God because God wants us to find true and eternal love. That is the source of our ultimate happiness. That's also the source of where we give love to offspring. And we create the most beautiful thing in the world, which is a family. So I believe the reason there's all this quest and this searching is because it's implanted in our souls. We're meant to find it. We're asked to find it. But in our society, we're told to do everything opposite of what is natural. And hence there is this conflict, this incessant conflict between the search that is embedded in our soul, the desire in our soul, and the reality all around us. We can't find it. Where is it? It's in this environment that people like Patti Stanger flourish because she peddles at least some of the rules. And sometimes she's hilarious in how she chastises women for their unwillingness to embrace their femininity and how beautiful being feminine is. I think it's very superficial to talk about femininity as merely what you wear. That's not necessarily what is feminine. The art of being a woman, and I phrase this and I want you, especially you ladies, to listen and to meditate on this. The art of being a woman is the art of surrender. Surrender doesn't mean submission. It doesn't mean let's take us back to the Middle Ages. Nobody's arguing for that. And I say, think of the word I've just used, the art of it. The art of surrender. That's one of the reasons why I love ballroom dancing. In ballroom dancing, when it's done right, not what you see on Dancing with the Stars, but when it's done right, women are taught the art of surrender and men lead. And that epitomizes, idealizes all the age-old courtship standards that we used to have. Well, I love it when she takes women to task for their complete inability to embrace their own femininity. I think she's dead on. The most unattractive feature in a woman for a man, and I've heard many men say it, is when women act just like them. And guess what? The most unattractive feature in a man, I've heard so many women say it, is when men fail to act like men. And what do I mean by that? When they behave in a politically correct, wimpy, insecure, overly sensitive way. It is a total turnoff. So many times I've been on the phone with my girlfriend saying, oh, for crying out loud, he couldn't man up. He wasn't enough of a man. He wasn't enough of a man to pick up the phone and ask me out on a date. He had to send me a text. He wasn't enough of a man to pick up the tab. He wasn't enough of a man to confront the issue at hand, whatever it was, to discuss it, wimpiness. Men not behaving like men, being just a bunch of wimps. But where does it come from? It comes from our culture. Because we've subjugated the man. We've subjugated the man and we've masculinized the woman. And the result is chaos. And worse than chaos, lonely people unable to find love, immersing themselves in this sea, they're drowning in it, a sea of pornography and casual sex that leads to nothingness and barrenness. That's the world we've created. Now, look, I applaud this woman for saying Patti Stanger makes some good points about the importance of the roles of men and women and how that is vital to creating sexual chemistry and to creating long-lasting passion. What I think this woman misses is that, unfortunately, Patti Stanger often comes across on her show like a madame. You know, a madame in the worst way. Because what she's also peddling is an idea that I find abhorrent. That a woman uses her sexual prowess in order to entice a wealthy man. I'm sorry. That is disgusting. That is not the path to love. That is how our celebrity culture takes something, responds to a crying need, like the rules of courtship. They need to be clarified, and Patti Stanger's trying to respond to that. But then it gets perverted because she got to mix it up with the quest for money, the quest for the superficial things. And I think in the end, I tuned out of watching Patti Stanger because ultimately her show, I believe, is profoundly immoral. Because women are being told, become feminine so you can attract a wealthy guy. That is an appalling, that is an immoral message. And so therefore, I don't think that it is accurate to call Patti Stanger a traditionalist. There's another word for what we can call her. It's not a good word. So that's how I feel. That's what I think. And if this is a theme that we have to come back to again and again in our society, because there are so many young men and women searching desperately for love and looking for it in all the wrong places. You are listening to Dr. Grace, upholding values that will never die.
Oh, baby, you got me all wrong, baby. My baby's already got all of my love. So no, honey, I'm good. I can have another, but I probably should not. I got somebody at home, and if I stay, I might not leave alone.
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace. The stories that matter, the issues that count. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
Shut up, just shut up, shut up, shut up, just shut up, shut up, shut it up, just shut up, shut up, shut 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 it up, just shut up, shut up.
Well, this week, Donna Brazile earns the distinction of being the one that we want to say, just shut up. She was embroiled in a discussion on This Week with George Stephanopoulos, and essentially she was arguing with Bill Kristol, and it descended into a shouting match, but you can still hear what she's saying. The discussion was Hillary, and the topic at hand was, how is Hillary doing in light of all the revelations coming forward regarding the emails on Benghazi and the Clinton Foundation scandal? Listen to Donna Brazile being a hack like no one ever has been.
And transparency. What most Americans are saying is, you know what? We know who she is. She's the only candidate right now that's talking about big issues, criminal justice reform. She's talking about immigration.
She's not talking about anything. You can hear her. I like the way Donna's society is terrible. The Republicans are actually giving speeches, having press conferences, giving interviews, meeting voters. Maybe Hillary Clinton should try to actually say something about something. What is her position on the NSA? What is her position on the NSA? What's her position on the free trade?
You act as if you're not reading.
Keith has his.
She's endorsed the USA Freedom Act in the House bill.
On the trade, she's talked about what she would rule out. She's talked about currency manipulation. She's talking about environmental and work. Here's what I know: there's a lot of substance coming out of her campaign, but unless it's sound bites that the Republicans can put out there and their little need to raise money, you don't listen.
This is absolutely appalling. Even the left-wing press said for weeks that Hillary Clinton was not addressing the questions of the press. The Washington Post even had a clock where they were ticking. They were counting how long it had been since Hillary Clinton took any questions from the press. Finally, she started to take a couple of questions very selectively and gave answers that are nothing other than what we all know to be a dodge. That's how she answers questions. She dodges the questions. And how dare Donna Brazile say that the Republicans are not talking about the issues, but Hillary Clinton is? On the biggest issue in the Democratic Party right now, Hillary Clinton has refused to take a stand. She has not pronounced what her view on the current trade deal is. And Donna Brazile goes on to say, well, she has said what she would rule out. You know what that is, Donna Brazile? That's called a dodge. When you don't say definitively, I am for or against this bill, as Senator Elizabeth Warren has said, she should clearly come out and say her position. When you don't clearly say I am for or against, you are dodging. And she goes on to say about, the depth of policy that's coming from Hillary Clinton. What's really coming out of the mouth of Hillary Clinton is obfuscation, lies, and dodges. And instead, it's the Republicans who are giving speech after speech where they're going into details of policy, as we just proved it on this show with Huckabee talking extensively about the fair tax, about his view regarding judicial supremacy, etc. It is the Republicans who are being totally open to the press and conducting a campaign as they should be, talking to the people, as represented often by the questions that the press asks. Instead, Hillary Clinton is being nothing other than evasive, and it's Donna Brazile's job to call her out on it, not cover up for her. Shame on you, and just shut up. There was a new movie on Lifetime that came out this week. I don't know if you had a chance to see it. It is Grace of Monaco. It is a segment of the true life story of Grace Kelly, the gorgeous actress who later became a princess. She married Prince Rainier of Monaco and had children with him. And that's where she resided for the rest of her life, really. She left America and was the Princess of Monaco. Well, the movie stars Nicole Kidman, and it takes the story from 1962 onwards, a segment of Grace's life where she was really at a turning point. She kind of regretted having left her acting life, and she found it very difficult to adapt to the rigors of her new role. And you see the battle within her. Well, the movie was initially made for the movies. It was supposed to be picked up and distributed across American theaters. But instead, it was so roundly savaged by the critics that it went straight to television. And it was featured on Lifetime. And some of the reports that I've read say that Nicole Kidman, Oscar-winning actress, Academy Award-winning actress, she was devastated that it went right to TV. Now, I am a big fan of Grace Kelly. One of my hobbies is to read about old Hollywood, especially the golden age of Hollywood. And I know a great deal about her life, so I was really intrigued to see this portrait. And I was asking myself this question: are the critics right? Well, listen first to the trailer and tell me if the trailer intrigues you about the movie. Is it something you'd want to see? Roll it.
I don't know how I'm going to keep living with him. I don't know how I'm going to spend the rest of my life in this place where I can't be me. Some of you ask, why did I leave Hollywood? Well, I left because I fell in love with a charming prince.
The poignant true story of an actress becoming a princess. Grace of Monaco.
Now, the story is indeed very captivating. What happens after that glorious wedding? How did she adjust to her life? What happens when she craved returning to Hollywood? In fact, the movie features she's being offered the role of Marnie by Alfred Hitchcock. She has the opportunity to go back. And I realized as I watched the movie why the critics savaged it. Because at its core, Grace Kelly made a decision that modern liberal America hates. When she was at a crossroads, when there was tension in her marriage, when she was unsure of her path, she didn't cut and run. She didn't leave the rigors and duties of the life of royalty, really. She didn't just abandon it and go back to Hollywood to lead the life of the hedonist. She didn't divorce her husband. She didn't abandon her children. When the rubber hit the road, she made a decision to uphold the obligations that she had committed herself to. There's a key scene in the movie where a priest tells her, Grace, love is an obligation. And that turns her way of thinking, and she decides she's going to recommit herself to her marriage, to her family, and to Monaco. And she becomes a glorious princess. It's a great movie. Ignore the critics. There is so much that is beautiful and good and true in that film. This is Dr. Grace, upholding values every week that will not die.
Countless dreams, happiness ain't out of reach.
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.